My daughter promised her husband my inheritance, so I sold the property with them still inside. Before I begin, thank you for being here, for being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman finding her voice and reclaiming her dignity, you are in the right place. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It means the world to me. Now, let me tell you what they did to me. My name is Dr. Althea Devereaux, and for 40 years, my life was a study in the careful administration of legacy. As the dean of a small, respected university, I had stewarded the futures of thousands of students, managed complex budgets, and navigated the treacherous politics of academia with a calm, strategic grace. I thought I understood power, ambition, and the subtle art of managing difficult personality. I had no idea that my most challenging, most heartbreaking case would be my own family. At 68, I was a widow living in the beautiful, sprawling home in Buckhead, Atlanta that my late husband, Richard, and I had built together. It was more than a house. It was a testament to our shared life, a sanctuary of art, books, and quiet, intellectual peace. The property was expansive, complete with a beautifully appointed 2-bedroom guest house nestled amongst the magnolias at the far end of the garden. It was a space I kept pristine, a quiet retreat for my own writing and occasionally for visiting friends. My daughter Simone and her husband Reginald lived in a trendy but cramped condominium downtown, a life that was a constant, anxious performance of affluence they couldn't truly afford. Their visits to my home were frequent, and I noticed, with a growing sense of unease, that their compliments about my property were becoming more proprietary. "This guest house is just divine, Mama," Simone would say, running her hand along the polished wood of the guest house's small porch railing. "It's a shame it sits empty most of the time." Reginald, my son-in-law, was less subtle. He was a man who wore his ambition like a suit that was 2 sizes too tight, flashy, expensive, and deeply uncomfortable to witness. He was a small-time commercial real estate broker who dreamed of being a titan, a man who saw my beautiful home not as a family sanctuary, but as a future asset on his personal balance sheet. His critiques of my life were disguised as helpful suggestions. "Althea," he'd said one afternoon, gesturing at my prize-winning azaleas, "this garden is lovely, but it's not really up to the neighborhood standards, is it? A proper English garden, something more structured, would do wonders for the curb appeal." His influence over my daughter was a slow, insidious poison. Simone, my bright, beautiful girl, had always been a little weak-willed, a little too eager to please, and she was utterly captivated by Reginald's slick charm and his grand promises of a life of effortless luxury. She began to echo his sentiments. "Mama," she'd said, looking at the cherished collection of African art my husband and I had spent a lifetime acquiring, "this is all very historical. But don't you think a more modern aesthetic would open up the space? Maybe we could put some of these older pieces into storage." The whispers began about a year ago. They were not just whispers about the future, but about the present. They began to complain openly about their own financial situation, their voices full of a staged despair clearly intended for my benefit. "This whole property, baby," I heard Reginald say to Simone one evening as they sat on my main patio, their voices drifting towards my open guest house window. "It's our inheritance. It's what she owes you. Your mother promised you this life, Simone. She promised you would be taking care of this house, this land. It's our future." He was twisting my love, my generosity into a promise of a future inheritance. An inheritance he was growing increasingly impatient to receive. He was not just waiting for me to die. He was actively planning for it, counting on it, building his entire life's ambition on the foundation of my eventual demise. I said nothing. I endured the subtle slights, the growing sense of being a tolerated but unwelcome presence on my own property. I did it for my daughter, for the fragile peace of our family. I told myself it was just talk, the harmless fantasy of a greedy, ambitious man. But then their impatience turned into a direct, audacious proposition. They sat me down in my own living room, their faces masks of rehearsed sincerity. "Althea," Reginald began, his voice a smooth purr, "Simone and I have been thinking. That guest house, it's the perfect starter home for a young family, a place for us to build our own equity while still being close enough to help you. It's the first step in claiming the future you always promised her." He was framing their desire as my promise. The gall of it was breathtaking. "The guest house is not for living in, Reginald," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It is for guests. And for my own peace, and quiet. Simone's face fell. But mama, she whined, her voice a carefully calibrated tool of manipulation. It's just sitting there, empty. We're drowning in our condo fees. We can't save a penny. It's the perfect solution. Don't you want to help your own family? The solution, Simone, I replied, my voice as cool as the iced tea in my glass, is for you and your husband to learn to live within their own means. You are both successful professionals. Act like it. The guest house is not an option. The conversation ended there in a tense, angry stalemate. I had said no. I had drawn a line. I had foolishly believed that would be the end of it. I had no idea it was just the beginning of their hostile takeover. The week following my firm refusal to let them occupy the guest house was one of cold, simmering silence. They avoided me, their resentment a palpable, chilling presence in my home. I thought, in my naivety, that they were simply licking their wounds, that they had accepted my decision. I did not realize they were simply regrouping, planning a more direct, more audacious assault. The takeover happened on a Tuesday. I had gone out for the morning, a weekly engagement with my book club, a small bastion of my own independent life. I returned just after noon to find a large moving truck parked in my long, elegant driveway. Its ramp extended to the front door of my guest house. I sat in my car for a long moment, my heart a frantic panic drum against my ribs, unable to process the scene before me. Two large men were carrying a sofa, their sofa, a monstrous contemporary piece of furniture that I despised, through the front door of my private sanctuary. And directing them with the imperious air of a conquering general was my daughter, Simone, a clipboard in her hand. I was so stunned, so utterly, completely poleaxed by the sheer audacity of it that for a moment, I couldn't even move. They had not just ignored my refusal, they had completely disregarded it. They were taking over my home by force, in broad daylight, as if they had every right in the world. I finally found the strength to get out of my car, my hands trembling with a rage so profound it made my vision swim. I walked, my steps unsteady, towards the scene of the invasion. I saw my own cherished belongings, my favorite reading armchair, my small antique writing desk where I wrote my letters, a box of my late husband's books, sitting unceremoniously on the lawn, dewdrops still clinging to the grass like discarded trash. Simone, I cried, my voice a raw, broken thing. What are you doing? What is the meaning of this? Those are my things. She turned to me, her face not one of shame or apology, but of cool, unapologetic resolve. We're moving in, Mama, she said simply, as if stating the most obvious fact in the world. I told you this was happening. We need a place to live. And this, she gestured vaguely towards the guest house, is our inheritance. We're just claiming it a little early. We can put your old things in storage. It's for the good of the family. My inheritance, I repeated, my voice now rising with a furious disbelief. This is my home. You cannot just move in here against my will. I told you no. And we decided you were wrong, Reginald said, emerging from the guest house, a smug, triumphant smirk on his face. He wiped his hands on his expensive trousers. This is a family property, Althea, and we are family. We have a right to be here. You promised Simone you would always take care of her. This is you taking care of her. They were twisting my love, my lifelong promise to care for my daughter, into a legal justification for trespassing, for theft. They were gaslighting me on a level so profound it was almost surreal. I stood there, helpless, as they continued to move their things in, filling my small, quiet sanctuary with their loud, expensive, and unwelcome presence. My bedroom became their bedroom. My small study became their office. I was now a guest in my own guest house, a tenant in the last square footage of my own life. The humiliation was a constant, suffocating presence. They would host their friends on my porch, their loud, shallow laughter echoing through my small space. They would use my kitchen, leaving it a mess, their half-eaten plates of expensive takeout a testament to their disrespect. They had not just invaded my space, they had conquered it. That night, after they had finally settled in, I retreated to the main house, to my own vast, empty bedroom, the silence of it now a mocking testament to my own foolishness. I had been systematically squeezed out of my own life, my own property. I lay in my bed, staring into the darkness, listening to the faint sounds of their music, of their laughter, drifting across the garden from my guest house. I felt a profound sense of defeat. They had won. They had taken everything, my home, my peace, my dignity. But as I lay there, a new feeling began to stir within me, a feeling I hadn't known I was still capable of. It was the cold, hard, and deeply satisfying click of a strategic mind awakening. They thought they had won the battle for the guest house. They had no idea they had just started a war for the entire property, a war they were not equipped to fight. A war they were about to lose in the most spectacular and public way imaginable. They had forgotten one crucial detail in their brilliant hostile takeover. I, their quiet, helpless mother, was the one whose name was on the deed, and I was about to use that deed to evict them, not just from my guest house, but from my life forever. The days following their hostile takeover of my guest house were a masterclass in psychological torment. They treated me with a new, chillingly dismissive confidence, the confidence of conquerors who believe their victory is absolute. I was no longer a person to them. I was a problem that had been successfully contained, a piece of old furniture moved to a less conspicuous room. But my initial shock and heartbreak, the profound sense of violation, began to transform. It cooled, hardened, and sharpened into the cold, precise fury of the university dean I had once been. I had spent my career managing difficult personalities, navigating complex institutional politics, and, when necessary, bringing the full weight of institutional authority down upon those who believed they were above the rules. My son-in-law Reginald and my daughter Simone were about to learn that I had not forgotten how to fight. My first move was not an emotional confrontation, but a quiet, methodical act of archival research. While they were out one afternoon celebrating their victory with a lavish lunch, I went to my own study in the main house. I went to the old metal lockbox hidden in the back of the closet, a box they had likely forgotten existed. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, beneath my late husband's military medals and my own birth certificate, was the one document that truly mattered, the original, true deed to the entire property. I spread it out on the desk, the heavy official paper a comforting weight in my hands. I looked at the framed photo of my late husband, Richard, on my desk, his kind, intelligent eyes smiling back at me. "Oh, Richard," I whispered, my voice a raw, aching thing. "You always told me this house was our legacy, a testament to a life built on integrity and hard work. You told me to be its fierce protector." My grief, for a moment, was a physical thing, a crushing weight, but then it began to change. The sadness curdled into a cold, hard resolve. "They have mistaken my kindness for weakness. My love," I continued, my voice now a low, dangerous murmur. "They think they can just take what we built. They have forgotten who I am, but I have not. This isn't just a house, Richard. It's our life's work. And I will not let these greedy, ungrateful children desecrate it." And there it was, in clear, unambiguous legal language. Grantee, Dr. Althea Devereaux, a single woman. My ownership was sole, absolute, and unassailable. Their names were nowhere on it. The guest house they had so arrogantly occupied was not a separate entity. It was a part of the property I, and I alone, legally owned. From a legal standpoint, they were not just uninvited guests. They were trespassers. The knowledge was a shot of pure, invigorating power. I had the law on my side. I had the truth. My next step was to find a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I needed a shark, a warrior, someone who would understand the profound injustice of my situation and would fight for me with a righteous, surgical precision. I thought of my old friend Monica Reeves, a woman I had known for 30 years, a woman who had become one of the most formidable real estate litigators in Atlanta. I called her that afternoon, my voice calm and resolute. "Monica," I began, "it's Althea Devereaux. I have a tenant problem and I would like to initiate eviction proceedings." I met her at her discreet downtown office the next day. I laid out my story, my voice steady, my narrative supported by the unassailable legal truth of the deed. I told her of my initial generosity, of their escalating entitlement, of their promise of an inheritance, and finally of their hostile takeover of my guest house. Monica listened, her expression shifting from professional interest to a kind of quiet, admiring fury. Althea, she said when I had finished, her voice a low, furious hiss. They did what? They moved into your guest house against your will? Oh, honey, we are not just initiating eviction proceedings. We are going to perform a surgical extraction of their entire entitled fraudulent lives from your property. Her righteous anger on my behalf was a balm to my soul. It validated every ounce of my own fury. Our strategy was not to engage in a messy, protracted legal battle over their right to be there. That would be playing their game. No. Our strategy was to enact a simple, powerful, and utterly devastating business transaction. You have every right to sell this property, Althea, Monica explained, a slow, predatory smile on her face. Your sole ownership is clear, and as the owner, you have the right to sell it to whomever you please, whenever you please. The fact that your daughter and her husband are currently occupying the guest house is, from a legal standpoint, an inconvenience for the new owner, not a barrier to the sale. The plan was audacious, brilliant, and deeply, deeply satisfying. I would not evict them myself. I would not engage in their petty dramas. I would simply sell the entire property right out from under them. We will do it quietly, Monica had said. An off-market, private sale to a cash buyer who understands the situation and has the legal resources to handle the tenant removal after the closing. It will be a clean, swift transaction. They won't even know what's happening until the moving trucks arrive. The trap was set. The quiet, retired dean had just opened her old playbook of strategic administration. And my daughter and son-in-law, so confident in their small, petty victory of conquering my guest house, had no idea that they were about to lose the entire kingdom. Their promised inheritance was about to be sold to the highest bidder, and they, the self-proclaimed new masters of the manor, were about to become nothing more than squatters, waiting for an eviction notice from a stranger. The weeks that followed my meeting with Monica were a masterclass in covert operations. I was a spy in my own home. A quiet, unassuming old woman by day, a strategic, formidable property magnate by night. I continued my performance as the defeated matriarch, my movements slow, my voice soft, my presence in the main house a constant, quiet reminder of their victory. They grew comfortable, complacent, so certain of their power that they never once suspected the ground was about to be sold right out from under their feet. Monica, my brilliant lawyer and now my co-conspirator, worked with a swift, silent efficiency. She engaged a high-end commercial real estate broker, an old friend of her firm who specialized in discreet off-market transactions for high net worth clients. There would be no for sale sign on my beautiful Buckhead lawn, no public open houses to alert my nosy neighbors or, more importantly, my unsuspecting children. The entire sale was to be conducted in the shadows, a ghost of a deal that would only materialize at the final, devastating moment. The broker found a buyer within a week, not a family, but a private real estate investment firm with a reputation for being aggressive, unsentimental, and having a legal team that could chew through nails. They saw the property for what it was, a prime piece of real estate in one of Atlanta's most desirable neighborhoods, an asset with immense potential. The fact that it came with uninvited tenants, as Monica had so delicately phrased it, was not a deterrent to them. It was simply a logistical problem to be solved, a small line item in their acquisition budget. They made a generous, all-cash offer, well above the market value, with one condition: a quick, no-fuss 14-day closing. It was perfect. The single crucial showing of the property was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon, a time I knew with absolute certainty that Simone and Reginald would be out at one of their long, self-important lunches. The most difficult part was getting them out of the guest house. I had to invent a crisis, a small, believable emergency that would require their presence elsewhere. I went to the main water shutoff valve for the guest house, a trick my late husband had taught me, and turned it just enough to reduce the water pressure to a frustrating trickle. Then I made my call, my voice a practiced quaver of distress. "Simone, dear," I'd said, "the plumbing in the guest house is acting up again. The shower is just a dribble. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I simply can't manage it on my own." Her sigh on the other end of the phone was a symphony of annoyance. "Honestly, Althea," she'd snapped, "can't you handle anything yourself? Fine, we'll be there after our lunch meeting. Try not to make it worse." Her condescension was a small price to pay. While they were out, dealing with a non-existent plumbing issue I had invented. The buyers, a team of sharp-suited investors, were given a private, comprehensive tour of the entire property, the main house, the guest house, the gardens. They saw the potential, the value, the prime real estate they were about to acquire. The closing was scheduled for a Friday at a downtown title company. I took a taxi. My movements a secret, my purpose a quiet, thrilling hum in my veins. I signed the papers with a steady, confident hand, my signature, the one they had so often dismissed, now the most powerful instrument in the room. A certified check for a life-altering sum of money was placed in my hand. It was done. The beautiful home on Peachtree Street, the legacy of my late husband, the stage for my daily humiliation, was no longer mine. It now belonged to a faceless, ruthless investment firm. I had Monica arrange for the new owner's representatives to arrive at the property the very next day, a Saturday. I knew Simone and Reginald would be home, likely gloating about their successful week. I wanted them to be there. I wanted them to be caught completely, utterly off guard. My revenge was not going to be a confrontation. It was not going to be an argument. It was going to be a formal, legally binding, and utterly impersonal changing of the locks. The kingdom they thought they had conquered was about to be reclaimed by a new, far more powerful ruler. And I, from the quiet, comfortable vantage point of a luxurious suite at the Four Seasons Hotel, would be waiting for the frantic panic phone call that I knew was about to come. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect, beautiful day for an eviction. I was at my post by 8:30, seated at a small table at a sidewalk cafe just down the street from my old home, a cup of steaming coffee in my hand, a newspaper open on the table as a prop. I was not reading. I was watching, waiting. My heart was a calm, steady drum, the quiet, rhythmic beat of a justice that was long overdue. The entire scene felt like a slow-motion thriller, a final, cinematic act of my own making. At precisely 9 o'clock, it arrived, a large, formidable moving truck, its diesel engine, a low, powerful rumble in the quiet morning air. It pulled up directly in front of the house, its sheer size a declaration of intent. I watched as the new owners, a team of sharp-suited representatives from the investment firm, got out of their car, their faces impassive and professional. The neighbors, out for their morning walks with their small dogs, slowed their pace, their curiosity piqued by the unexpected commotion. They knew I hadn't moved. The first sign of chaos came a few minutes later. The blinds on the guest house window, which had been closed, were suddenly, violently snapped open. I could just make out the silhouette of my daughter, Simone, peering down at the moving truck, her posture a rigid line of confusion and annoyance. I could almost hear her irritated sigh from across the street, the sound of her perfect Saturday being disrupted. The real fireworks began when the representatives, accompanied by a locksmith and a uniformed security guard, made their way to the guest house door. The lead representative knocked, a sharp, authoritative sound. Simone answered, dressed in an expensive silk robe, her hair a mess, her face a mask of furious disbelief. "What do you think you are doing?" she shrieked, her voice a shrill, ugly thing that carried across the quiet street, causing several neighbors to stop and stare openly. "This is a private residence. You have no business here." The representative, a calm, unflappable man, simply handed her a document. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a tired, seen-it-all rumble. "We are representatives of Sterling Thorne Investments, the new legal owners of this entire property as of 3:15 p.m. yesterday. We are here to take possession. We have a court order requiring you to vacate the premises immediately." "The new owners?" Simone repeated, her laugh a high, hysterical sound. "That's impossible. We are the owners. This is our home." It was then that her husband Reginald appeared, his own face a mask of confusion. "What's going on?" he demanded. The representative, with a sigh of weary patience, held out a copy of the new deed, the investment firm's name clearly officially printed upon it. I watched from my cafe table as my daughter and son-in-law stared at the document, their faces turning from furious denial to ashen, horrified disbelief. The truth, the impossible, catastrophic truth, was finally crashing down upon them. It was then that Simone's phone came out. I saw her frantically stabbing at the screen, her face a mask of pure, panicked rage. A moment later, my own phone, which I had placed on the table beside my coffee cup, began to buzz. I let it buzz. Once, twice, 3 times. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. I let the sound of her panic be the soundtrack to my quiet victory. Then, on the 4th ring, I answered, my voice a calm, serene, and utterly devastating purr. "Hello, Simone, dear. Is something the matter?" "Mama," she shrieked into the phone, her voice a raw, ragged sound of a cornered animal. "What is happening? There are men here. They have papers. They say they own the house. They say we have to leave. This is insane. What did you do?" I took another sip of my coffee. "I did what any prudent property owner would do, Simone," I replied, my voice as sweet as poison. "I sold an underperforming asset." "Sold it?" she repeated, her voice a raw croak of disbelief. You sold the house without telling us? You can't do that." "Oh, but I can, my dear," I replied, a small cold smile on my lips. "And I have. The deed, as you would have known if you had ever bothered to look at it, has always been in my name. And my name alone. You and your husband were not my family. You were my tenants, and your lease, so to speak, has been terminated." I could hear Reginald in the background now, his voice a furious roar. "Tell her she's a crazy old witch. Tell her we'll sue. We'll fight this." "You are welcome to try, of course," I said, my voice still calm, almost bored. "But you will be fighting Sterling Thorne Investments, a firm with a legal team that could buy and sell your husband's entire life 100 times over. I doubt they will be as accommodating as I have been." I then delivered the final, devastating blow, the one that was the heart of my entire revenge. "You promised your husband my inheritance, Simone," I said, my voice now as cold and as sharp as a diamond. "You moved into my guest house. You treated me like a bird, and you thought you could just take what was mine. You forgot that an inheritance is a gift, not a debt, and it is a gift that is only given to those who are worthy." I paused, letting my words sink in, letting her feel the full weight of their catastrophic miscalculation. "You and your husband," I concluded, "are not worthy. You have your inheritance now. It is the pile of your belongings currently being deposited on the curb. I suggest you go and attend to it. Goodbye, Simone." I hung up the phone, my hand perfectly steady. The ambush was complete. Their plot had not just failed. It had been turned back on them with a force they could not possibly have anticipated. They had tried to take my home. Instead, they had been left homeless. Their perfect, entitled world shattered into a million pieces by a single, quiet, and utterly devastating real estate transaction. I hung up the phone on my daughter's stunned, horrified silence. From my vantage point at the Sidewalk Cafe, I had a front row seat to the final, pathetic act of their domestic tragedy. I watched as Simone, her face a mask of utter devastation, slid down the wall of the building's elegant lobby, her phone clattering from her numb fingers. I watched as Reginald, my son-in-law, a man who had always been so full of bluster and arrogance, just stood there, his mouth agape, his world completely, irrevocably shattered. The security guard, a large no-nonsense man, informed them they had 1 hour to remove their personal effects before they would be forcibly escorted from the premises. The scene that followed was a chaotic, humiliating scramble. I watched as they frantically dragged their expensive, oversized furniture out of my guest house and onto the pristine Buckhead sidewalk, creating a pathetic, jumbled pile of their failed ambitions. I saw them having an explosive, whispered argument, their gestures full of blame and recrimination. "This is your fault, Simone," Reginald hissed, his voice carrying on the quiet morning air. "You and your stupid, entitled promises. You told me this house was ours." "My fault?" she shrieked back. "You were the one who pushed me. You were the one who couldn't wait. You underestimated her. You thought she was just a stupid old woman." Their perfect partnership had crumbled under the first real pressure it had ever faced. The final image I have of them is one I will carry with me always. It was a picture of two people, utterly, completely defeated, sitting on the curb amidst their designer luggage, their world reduced to a few hastily packed boxes, as the new owner's representatives calmly directed the locksmith to change the locks. They were now homeless, surrounded by their expensive, useless things, a direct visual consequence of their actions. My revenge was complete. It had been a quiet, logistical, and devastatingly effective maneuver. I had not screamed. I had not cried. I had simply sold the apartment. The weeks that followed were a quiet joy. I used the substantial proceeds from the sale to buy my own, smaller but far more peaceful condominium in a different part of the city. My new home was a sanctuary. It was filled not with expensive rental furniture, but with my own cherished pieces that had been in storage. My husband Richard's armchair sat by the window, which overlooked a park filled with old, wise oak trees. The air smelled of lemon polish and my own baking, not the artificial scent of Simone's ambitions. It was a space that was entirely, unequivocally mine. I heard through the grapevine of their downfall. Unable to afford the city, and with their reputations in their social circle in tatters, they were forced to move to a small, bleak rental apartment in a distant suburb. Reginald, I was told, had lost his promotion. Simone's influencer career had vanished overnight. Her social media, a ghost town of her own making. Their perfect life had been exposed as a hollow, fraudulent sham. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel glee. I felt a profound, quiet, and deeply satisfying sense of peace. One afternoon, about a month after I had settled into my new home, I sat on my sunny balcony, a cup of tea in my hand, and I thought about what I had done. I had been called an embarrassment, a burden, a woman who should be hidden away, but I had proven them wrong. I had proven that a quiet woman is not a weak one. I had proven that a mother's love, when betrayed, can transform into a force of nature. And I had proven that the owner of the deed is and always will be the one who holds all the power. They had wanted me to stay in my room. Instead, I had taken the entire house. My revenge was not just in their loss. It was in my own quiet, dignified, and unbreakable freedom. My final thought was not of them, but of the new life I was building. I had spent my life as a university dean, stewarding the legacies of others. Now, finally, I was free to build my own. And this chapter I knew would be the best one yet.